So for this video, we're going to actually need to import another library into our character class because we want to get like player input. So we're going to create a new variable uh, called static scanner, and we're going to introduce this in a way similar to how we introduce a player object. Okay, we're going to say in. And you can call that input if you want it. I'm going to call it in for short. Uh, is equal to new scanner, and then we want it to take the system.in value. Okay, so what that means, so to import this library, we can either hover over and import it, or you can just hit Control Shift O inside of Eclipse, and it imports any library that you're using. But what this does is it'll ask us to input something into the console, and then we input it and press enter, and it'll work. Now, this isn't what we're going to be using later when we go into actual applications. We're going to be using events, but for now, this should work. So now we need to create a new method. So we're going to create a method called public void, because it's not going to return a value. It's just going to run some code. Player move. And I'm going to call it player move because we're going to create another one called monster move later. Okay, so inside of here, we're going to have a switch event. All right. So the switch event we're going to have is going to be based off of in.next, and that's it. Okay, actually we don't need to have the semicolon. So what this does, okay, what this does is it'll check to see whatever our next input is, all right? And then it'll do something. So in our case, we want it to check a bunch of things. So we want it to check whatever input and then have that input move our character around. All right, so we're going to have what if the case is equal to S? All right, and we have to use double quotations here because this isn't a character. This is figuring out what we're actually typing in, so it'll actually automatically convert to a string. So if we type in S, we'll have that as a case, and we'll add in the code in a second. And we also want a case for W. Okay. And I'm using WASD to move around and stuff. So then we want to break. And you have to write break to break out once the code has been complete. So if it checks for case S and that is true, then it'll break out of the switch. So it does. I'll do a case for A. And then a case for D. All right. And then we need to set a default. Okay, and you can even leave the default like this and it would actually work. But we're actually going to assign something to it. So if the case is F, we want to run a specific set of code. So first, we need to make sure that the player does not go out of bounds. To do that, we say if this dot get x, so get our x position, okay, is not equal to main dot max x board space. Okay, so remember, we want it so it's not equal to the out of bounds limit. Then run a bunch of code. So then we're going to say do this. And what we want to do is we want to say this dot x position plus plus. Okay? And now this puts us in a trap though, because if this isn't the case, then it won't run anything and it won't break out. So we have to tell it to break out. So we're just going to say else. So if else, and then we're just going to say break. And we have to put a semicolon because it's in the case. So, and we also have to put a semicolon in here for the break. Okay, so what this does is going to first check to see what we pressed in, and if we press S, okay, so it's going to then get our X position because remember S is going to move us down, and down in this terms is actually up, so plus plus because going up or bleh, moving across the X axis to go down in our case, it's going to be moving X up. So we're going to increment X. If we want to go up, we have to decrement X. So but first it's going to check what our X position is and if we're in the max board space. And then it's going to move us, okay, by 1 up. Or in this case, down. And then we're just going to copy this code. Okay. And we're going to put it here. And we're just going to change a couple things about it. So instead of being the max X board space, we want it to be the min. So we want to check if we're already up here and if we're going, we're trying to go farther. And we've got to change this to minus minus. All right. So this is checking to see if we're already in this space and if we're trying to go down. And this is checking to see if we're already in this space trying to go up. And if both of those are the case, then it'll be like, no, you can't do that. All right? So then case of A is going to be the same as this because A is going to be moving us left, which is decrementing in the Y position. So we can just copy this and just put this right here and then just change things to Y, Y, and Y. Okay, and that's perfectly fine. We're going to copy this, put it down here, and we're just going to do max and this one plus plus. Okay, so all this is doing is this one's checking to see if we're already in this far left and if we're trying to keep going left. And it's going to say if you are, then no thanks. And this one's going to be the opposite. It's going to say if we're far right and if we try to keep going right. Now, what do we want our default to be? So I'm going to say our default is going to be a system.out.println, and I'm going to have it say you did not type a valid code. Okay. So what this is going to do is if we're trying to do like if we type something in other than WASD, it's going to say you're not typing a valid code, and then it's not going to move us. Pretty simple. And this is our player move function. So now we can call this. So now down here, after draw board, because we don't want it to draw before it draws the board. We want it to do it after, so that way it'll recycle the turn. Okay, so it's basically pausing to see what we're going to do. So to call this, we just say player dot player move, just like that. Now let's see what happens. Okay, so you can see two things. One, it drew, but you can see that there's now this stop sign, and if you look, sometimes you'll get a loading screen on your mouse. But there's now this stop button. It's because our program is waiting for us to do something. And in this case, it wants us to move. So let's do that. Let's press A. And of course, nothing happened. The reason because it's not constantly checking. So to make it constantly check, we need to add two things. We need to add a while loop. So what this while loop is going to do is it's going to constantly check and constantly redo all of these things. So then we're going to create a Boolean for us to use up here. We're going to call it static Boolean. And we're going to call it has1. And we're going to automatically set it to false. The reason why is we want our while loop to keep running. So all we're going to say is while not has1. Okay, now what does that mean? So while has1 is equal to false, so while has1 is not true, it's going to keep doing this. So let's run it. And then we'll do A. Now we've moved over, and it's still going. The program is still going because it, has one is still equal to false, and you can see that we can go in every direction. And when we try to get to the end, it'll just not do anything. Remember, you have to type enter for it to go into the command. Okay? Oh, so yeah. So when I type in multiple things, it'll be like, oh, you didn't type something valid, right? Okay. So yeah. So let's just quickly create uh, a way to get out of this instead of. Oh, and by the way, you're gonna have to hit terminate for it to stop, or else it'll just keep running. So now let's make a way for us to win the game. So that way it'll actually do stuff. So there's a couple ways we can do this. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an if statement. So first we need to create a method. So let's do static void check win condition, right? So this is just checking our win condition. And we just want to have inside of here an if statement that says if player dot, and in our case we're going to have it so if you get to the end without running into the monster, you win. That's it. So if player dot get x is equal to 0, and you have to do two equal signs. We don't want to have this if here. So if player dot get x, so this just gets our x position, which is this way. And you can set this to whatever. You could find a very specific position within the battle board that you won't have to get to. But in this case, we're just going to do this. Then what we want to do is we want to say you've won. So system dot out dot print line, and in this case we're just going to say you won. And to actually get this to write something, we actually need to call our scanner. So our scanner is in our character class, so we can make this public. And it's kind of weird to be calling it like this, but we can actually just say character dot in dot next. And what it'll do is it'll wait for us to input something, and we can actually say here system dot out dot print line. We can say enter something to end. Okay, because what'll happen is if we just have this make us win, then it won't redraw the board and it'll just end. So it won't actually tell us we've won. So we want it to do that. So to do that, we now say has won equals true. And by putting this in here, it'll now wait for us to type something before it ends the program. All right? And it'll actually say all this stuff. So now we just add this in here. And we're just going to put it after drop board, and we're just going to say check win. All right? That's all I need to do, and then we can run. The program should still work fine. We can still move in all directions. Now let's just go to the end. Bam! You've won. Enter something in. Notice that our program is still running. Now we just type W, and there we go. And it told us we didn't enter a valid code. Perfect. So yeah, there we go.